This video is brought to you by the Deck of Many and Humblewood.net. Welcome back to the Gallant Goblin. I'm Theo, and as you can see here, we have a case of Pathfinder Battles Legendary Adventures pre-painted minis to open. A case comes in a box like this, wrapped in WizKids tape. It has the labeling on the side, like you saw, and it contains inside 4 bricks like this. Each brick has 8 booster boxes. Each booster box has a semi-random selection of 4 minis inside, including 1 large and 1 huge creature. I say semi-random because the overall set contains 12 rare figures, and these bricks and cases are designed such that each brick has 3 unique rare minis inside. So between the 4 bricks in here, you'll get all 12 rares. The trick is that you need to buy the case together like this if you want at least 1 of each figure. If you get 4 random bricks, you are not guaranteed to get 1 of each mini. Now this set has 44 figures, reflecting the new art style in Pathfinder 2nd edition. For each applicable entry, I'll refer you to the page number in the 2nd edition bestiary, where you can find the relevant stat block for each creature. Note that many of these minis sport a different name from the one they have in the stat block. Also, I'll give you the level of each creature. Some of us may be used to challenge ratings for determining how powerful or dangerous a creature may be. 2nd edition moves away from that and focuses on creature level. At the end of the video, I'll tell you more on how to use creature level to choose monsters for your different encounters depending on how difficult you want that encounter to be. Finally, several of the minis in this set were featured in the Legendary Adventures preview box released recently. Where applicable, we'll show you the alternate variant on the right side of your screen. But let's jump in and take a look. Pathfinder Goblin miniatures are generally named by which weapon they carry. This fellow carries a Dog-Slicer sword. It's a single piece of crude iron or steel, sharpened on one side, with holes cut out of the middle to make it lighter and easier to swing and carry by goblins who are not known for their physical strength. Goblins have an almost innate sense of hatred for dogs, and love little more than slicing them up into tiny pieces whenever they get the chance. The Goblin Horse-Chopper, now on the right side of your screen, is an uncommon weapon-swapped version of the Goblin Dog-Slicer, though it's hard to tell at first glance that they're based on the same sculpt. A horse-chopper is considered a polearm with a reach of 10 feet. It was designed by goblins to battle, horses. A horse-chopper can be used to forcibly move enemies or trip them. The Goblin Commando stat block on page 180 features a horse-chopper armed goblin. It's a level 1 creature. This set features a total of 5 different orcs, with 2 of those being color and weapon variants. There were also 2 color variants featured in the preview box, including this Orc Charger, so if you pick that up, you'll have a total of 7 different orc models to vary up your warband. The Orc Charger here, who is a common figure, sports the new Orc Knuckle Dagger, which was introduced in 2nd edition. This version of the Knuckle Dagger features a horizontal basket hilt with blades coming out of both ends. Another variant in this set is the Orc Rampager here, an uncommon, who wields the other version of the Orc Knuckle Dagger, with the blades coming out of the front instead of the sides. It's modeled after a Qatar dagger unique to the Indian subcontinent. The Knuckle Dagger is considered a knife and has the agile and disarm traits. An agile weapon lessens the penalty you take when making multiple attacks in a single round. The disarm trait means that you can use this weapon to attempt to disarm a foe with an athletic skill check, even if you don't have a free hand. The check uses the weapon's reach and item bonuses. On a critical success, you'll still need a free hand in order to take the other person's item. Both figures would use the Orc Brute stats on page 256. The Orc Brute is a level 0 creature. Legendary Adventures features 3 different Bugbear figures. The Bugbear Skulker here has a paint variant in the preview box. The bestiary features 2 Bugbear stat blocks, a Thug and a Tormentor. The Thug is armed with a bastard sword and javelins. The Tormentor, who enjoys torturing her prey for as long as possible, is armed with a dagger and sickles. So neither of them are technically armed with a club and shield, so you'll have to make a few adjustments if you want to play the Skulker here as he is represented. The Thug is a level 2 creature, and the Tormentor is level 3. Both are found on page 47. Our second orc figure is the Battler. She had a color variant in the preview box. One thing to note about orcs is that their culture is fractured and chaotic. Different clans will have different beliefs, superstitions, traditions, and taboos. These differences keep the warbands from coming together into a large orc alliance. In your games, when you introduce a new orc band, you may want to give thought to what their belief system is and what odd traditions they follow. This can make potential diplomatic overtures by your players quite interesting. And keep in mind that two orcs meeting in one place won't necessarily be friendly to each other. This Orc Battler is represented by the Orc Warrior stat block on page 257. She is a level 1 creature. Our second common goblin is the Goblin Guard, also armed with a Dog-Slicer sword. The Goblin Guard also has a paint variant in the preview box. Goblins prefer to overwhelm their prey with numbers, knowing that they're not going to overpower many foes in a one-on-one situation. Goblins are also creatures of contradiction. They cannot stand dogs, hence the sword name, but they often travel with so-called goblin dogs, though they're really just overgrown rodents. They hate vegetables, but adore pickles, and they'll gleefully try to swarm and take down a large creature, but are completely terrified of horses, which can be a fun idiosyncrasy to play if your horse-mounted party comes across a goblin tribe in the wilds. Again, your Goblin Warrior stat block is on page 180. Here we have our first new Hobgoblin, which will be the common Hobgoblin in this set, the Soldier. Hobgoblins don't have the impulsive, hyperactive traits that are common in their goblin cousins. They are almost completely fixated on war and battle, however. They are militaristic and tyrannical, highly organized and methodical. They're about the same height as humans. Hobgoblins work well together, so if you encounter them in battle, you're best advised to split them apart from their comrades before facing them down. A Hobgoblin Soldier is a level 1 creature and is found on page 206. The Armored Elf Soldier is a common figure that also had a paint variant in the preview box. There are quite a few minis in this collection that can be used as player characters. When minis are intended to be used as player characters, but they're included as common creatures in a set, as this one is, the hope is that they can be repurposed into generic NPCs to use if you visit their respective settlements or encounter traveling parties out in the wilds. These soldiers, despite their relatively triumphant poses, could stand in for an elven or human soldier or guard. Halflings are generally friendly, optimistic, amiable, and curious. They harbor a deep-seated hatred for the practice of slavery and will work tirelessly to free those who find themselves bound into labor against their will. This Halfling Slinger also had an alternate paint scheme in the preview set. This common mini is also probably generic enough to serve as a random Halfling NPC, but could also double as a human child. The sling is a quintessential Halfling weapon. A sling is considered a propulsive weapon, meaning that attacks with it use the strength modifier when determining damage, so make sure your Halfling Slinger doesn't miss arm day at the gym. The Orc Brawler is the other common orc in this set. He's armed with the Orc Knuckle Daggers and Javelins as seen in the Orc Brute stat block on page 256. Orcs also value bloodlines and family, and fight with even greater passion when they're shoulder to shoulder with their brothers and sisters. And if a family member is slain, they will stop at nothing to avenge them. However, these strong family allegiances can work against the orcs as well. Even a powerful orc warlord will see his power slip away if he's stripped of his brethren. Like the Bugbear Skulker reviewed previously, the Bugbear Mauler is armed with a shield and a spiked club. Since the stat block does not cover shields, let's talk about how one works in 2nd edition. This would be considered a steel shield. As you can see from this chart, the steel shield will grant a bonus of +2 to AC if the bugbear uses an action on its turn to raise it. If you take the shield block feat, you can reduce damage to you by the value of the hardness of the shield. So for the steel shield, that would be 5 points of damage. You and the shield would take the remaining damage. If that amount exceeds the remaining hit points of the shield, it will be destroyed. BT in the final column refers to the broken threshold. If the steel shield takes at least 10 points of damage, it is considered broken and unusable, though it can be repaired. Kobolds underwent an artistic redesign as well for 2nd edition, and this set includes 3 new kobolds to get you started. Like many of the figures in this set, these kobolds were developed from sketches by the legendary Pathfinder artist Wayne Reynolds. Kobolds consider themselves scions of dragonkind, and are quite proud of this fact, though the other races are more dubious of the claim. It's true that superficially at least, they do resemble dragons, down to their chromatic coloring. They are cunning and diligent. though most kobolds turn their skills to selfish ends. Being pragmatists, and not so physically strong, they often find themselves under the sway of more powerful monsters. A kobold warrior, as seen here, is a -1 level creature and found on page 212. In D&D 5th edition, we often talk about whether a race or ancestry is a natural fit for a particular class, based on whether they get bonuses to ability scores that are useful to that class. Pathfinder 2nd edition has found a nice way around that, though. Most ancestries in 2e get 2 ability boosts at character creation in certain areas, charisma and constitution for our gnome, for example. But they all get at least 1 free ability boost they can use for any other ability. So if you're making a Gnome Rogue, you'd likely pick Dexterity for your free boost. Our little Gnome Rogue is a common figure you can use to fill out any gnomish settlements or towns you may visit. If you're not keen on playing a rogue, she can also easily be used for any lightly armored class in the game. But she must be a quite talented rogue to stay hidden with her brightly colored hair and cloak. The Hobgoblin Sharpshooter would use the Hobgoblin Archer stat block on page 207. Archers aren't common among Hobgoblin bands, but there's almost always at least one. In smaller groups, the Archer is generally also the warband's captain. Interestingly, and somewhat frustratingly, the stat block for the Hobgoblin Archer indicates that it's supposed to be armed with a crossbow rather than a standard bow and arrows. The weapons behave somewhat differently using Pathfinder's more exacting rules, so it's up to you if you want to modify the stat block, just use the stats as written while describing the longbow as flavor only, or just explain that the Hobgoblin is using a crossbow even though the mini is holding a bow. Our little Goblin Ankle-Slasher adds more variety to our growing Goblin clan. He appears to be armed with a pair of hooked daggers, which do not, to my eye, appear in any Goblin stat block in the bestiary. You could use the stats for a regular dagger, which does 1d4 piercing damage and has the following traits: Agile, Finesse, Thrown 10 feet, and Versatile Slashing. Being an ankle slasher, he may be particularly well suited to hindering foes, keeping them from moving so the rest of the Goblin clan can swarm their victim, overwhelming them with sheer numbers. Goblin stat blocks are on page 180 and page 181. Goblin warriors have a level of -1. Most kobolds stay safely within the confines of their well-defended warren. If you encounter one out in the wilds, it's likely a trained scout, well-equipped for stalking and hunting prey. These level 1 creatures are armed with a short sword and crossbow. They are more dexterous than your average kobold soldier and thus harder to hit. Kobolds are also very adept at taking advantage when attacking unaware foes, being able to do additional sneak attack damage. Kobold Scouts can be found on page 213. Interestingly, the art that this mini is based on features a blue-scaled kobold. Since the term Paladin suggests true, lawful, and honorable motives, in Pathfinder 2nd edition the more broad term of Champion was adopted instead. Depending on which deity you choose to be a champion of, and what alignment your character is, your exact title will change, and so will your champion's reaction ability and your devotion spell. For example, if you're lawful good, you're a paladin. If you're neutral good, you're a redeemer. And if you're chaotic good, you're a liberator. The Dwarf Champion mini here can also double as a cleric or a fighter. This fellow very much exemplifies dwarven crafting expertise with his ornately designed armor. Rogues in Pathfinder 2nd edition choose among different rackets when making their characters. 3 are offered in the core rulebook. If you're a ruffian, you focus more on intimidation and direct confrontation when handling problems. If you're a scoundrel, you use manipulation through flattery and fast talking to get what you want. And if you're a thief, you obviously focus on staying unnoticed and taking what you want. If a life on the borderlines of society doesn't appeal to you, our Dwarf Rogue mini here could also be used for a knife-wielding monk or even a spellcaster. Shadows can lurk in any dimly lit area. You may encounter one in a dark corner of a candlelit room, in a forest as the sun begins to set, or in the back alley of a bustling city. They feed on people who stray too far from the light. It travels to and from the shadow plane, though no one knows exactly how. Through repeated attacks, a shadow can steal the casted shadow of another creature to become a shadow spawn under its control. The shadow spawn will become an independent shadow monster itself if the character from whom it was stolen dies. Shadows are level 4 creatures and are found on page 289. There is also a stat block for a Greater Shadow. Wraiths are malevolent, undead creatures created by necromancy, or by strongly evil souls who persist even after death. They can turn the living into other wraiths, so left unchecked, they can overwhelm a populated area. While they are vulnerable to sunlight, normal physical weapons can barely harm them. Unlike some mindless undead creatures, wraiths are intelligent and will use their incorporeal nature to their advantage in combat, phasing in and out of walls and other structures for protection. They will rarely fight out in the open. Wraiths are level 6 creatures and are found on page 335. A very small subset of kobolds manifest certain arcane abilities tied to their chromatic traits. These kobolds are held in high esteem in their kobold clans. Kobold dragon mages often use their arcane abilities to confuse and misdirect foes, rather than attack them directly. They gain damage resistances depending on the color of their scales. For instance, this blue kobold mage would have resistance level 5 to electricity. This level 2 creature can be found on page 213. Like wraiths, wights are undead humanoids who arise as a result of necromantic rituals, or by the sheer malevolent will of the violent deceased. They can drain the life force of the living with a touch. Any humanoid slain by a wight will soon rise as a wight itself, so a town can be quickly overrun if a single wight catches a helpless party unaware. Since they are sustained by negative energy, they are unaffected by their environment, and so might be found in very inhospitable places. As noted on the Paizo blog, the wight can also serve as a unique skeletal champion with a herd of lower-level undead creatures. The wight stat block can be found on page 332. Rangers in 2nd edition can define themselves at character creation by choosing how they trained to hunt their prey, and by choosing starting feats. Your training may be to unleash a flurry of attacks, reducing your penalty for multiple attacks in a turn. Or it may be focusing on a target's weak points, dealing extra damage. Or to outwit your target by staying out of its sight, deceiving it, or intimidating it. This Elf Ranger variant features dual swords in the A version and a bow and arrow in the B version. If used as a player character, the mini can be swapped out depending on what weapon he or she is using at a given time. If used to represent a series of elven NPCs, it's certainly nice to have a variety of figures on the table. A Pteranodon is one type of pterosaur, which is a primitive, dinosaur-like flying creature. Many pterosaurs are quite small, but the two presented in the bestiary, the Pteranodon and the Quetzalcoatlus, are large and huge creatures respectively. Pteranodons are quick and agile, able to swoop down on their prey and tear at them with their powerful beaks. It's considered a level 2 creature and is found on page 272. They can be found in a wide variety of climates and locations, but are most frequently spotted wheeling around in the sky above warm and temperate environments. Chimeras are classic monsters from Greek mythology, formed from the combination of a lion, dragon, and goat. They are voracious meat-eaters, often favoring the taste of humanoid flesh. While they are quite wild, very strong-willed humanoids have been known to tame them enough to serve as guardians or even mounts. Kobolds are quite fond of chimeras, but few have the will, resources, or courage to keep one tamed for long. With 3 heads, the chimera gets extra reactions each round. The dragon head can be of any color, and the color determines the type of damage its breath weapon deals. This red dragon head, for instance, would deal fire damage. They are level 8 creatures and can be found on page 63. Yetis, or abominable snowmen as they are colloquially called, lurk in the highest, most remote mountain peaks, and are rarely seen by humanoids, or at least by humanoids who survive to tell the tale. While they do raid villages and steal livestock to sustain themselves, their presence is often the only thing keeping the nearby settlements safe. See, Yetis often serve as guardians for the material plane. They lair near portals to other, stranger, and more malevolent planes. When creatures crawl their way through the portal, the Yeti is all that stands between it and us. Unfortunately, sometimes these alien creatures can overwhelm and corrupt the Yeti itself, turning it into a weapon for its own ends. The Yeti is a level 5 creature found on page 338. When thinking about giants in Pathfinder, Paizo recommends thinking of each subtype of giant as representing an oversized version of a different classical trope. Fire giants can be seen as militaristic smiths. Their society is focused around learning military techniques and forging the best weapons and armor. They are fitted with their first set of plate armor when they're just able to walk. Fire giants are between 12 and 16 feet tall, about 7,000 pounds, and they live to be about 350 years old. They can imbue their greatswords with fire and strike any creature in a 15-foot line. Fire giants are level 10 creatures and can be found on page 172. When Paizo announced that this set would be the first one in a long time to include huge miniatures, one of the most fan-requested minis was an Alghollthu, or Aboleth as it is sometimes known. Being an uncommon, you're going to get a few of these if you get a case. Aboleths have been around on the planet since time immemorial, and Aboleth society existed in the deepest parts of the ocean before the gods had even turned their attention to Golarion. Aboleths view themselves as the natural masters of the world, and see others as something to control to their own ends. They're powerfully psychic creatures, able to impose their will on others. Many types of Alghollthus exist in the darkest trenches of the seas, and Alghollthu-created monsters roam the surface, now long drifted away from their original creators. Alghollthu masters are level 7 creatures, found on page 14. Storm giants are chaotic good guardians of coastal, tropical, or island areas. While they seek to do good and protect those under their charge, they are quick to anger, and their mood can darken quickly like a coming storm. And they will cause devastation like a furious hurricane. Where the fire giant can channel fire, the storm giant can call down lightning onto his foes. Storm giants are about 21 feet tall, 12,000 pounds, and live to be about 600 years old. Storm giants are level 13 creatures and can be found on page 174. The dragon turtle is arguably the most impressive mini in this set. They are one of the most dangerous creatures you can encounter at sea. As a level 9 monster, they rank up there with young to adult dragons. As dragons, they are intelligent and speak Common, Aquan, and Draconic. They also hoard treasure and seek tribute from passing ships, lest they capsize them. Sailors struggle to avoid them because from a distance their shells resemble small rocky islands. There are rumors that some ancient dragon turtles float in remote parts of the ocean off of the shipping lanes, and their shells actually support entire ecosystems with humanoid settlements, the inhabitants of which have no idea that their home is actually alive. They can be found on page 128. Cloud giants are probably the most diverse subset of the various kinds of giant. In terms of alignment, many are neutral, but about an equal number are good and evil. Good aligned cloud giants are graceful and contemplative. They enjoy cultural activities and civic-minded projects such as creating roads and other infrastructure programs. They may align themselves with humanoids to establish trade agreements or cultural exchanges. Evil cloud giants can be reclusive and xenophobic. They sequester themselves away in hidden mountain valleys and raid other communities for what they want. And those rumors of magically floating cloud giant castles? Purely speculation, or so the cloud giants would have us believe. They are level 11 creatures and are found on page 173. Druids differentiate themselves by joining different druidic orders upon character creation, which grants them a class feat, an order spell, and an additional trained skill. 4 orders are presented in the core rulebook. A member of the Animal Order will be allied with a beast companion. A member of the Leaf Order reveres flora and nature's bounty and gains a Leshy familiar. A Storm Order member is unhampered by weather and uses the power of the storm to heighten their abilities. And a member of the Wild Order is more savage and feral, gaining the ability to wild shape into a variety of forms that increase as you gain more feats. This rare, barefoot figure is armed with a staff, holding her precious tea kettle, undoubtedly brewed with magical ingredients to aid her and her allies in battle. She also appears to be conjuring a spell to shield herself from danger. Earlier, I talked about ability boosts and how Pathfinder found a good solution for varying the options each ancestry has when choosing a class. One thing I didn't mention though, most ancestries also have an ability flaw, which provides a -2 to a particular ability that each ancestry does not excel in. For dwarves, this is charisma. Unfortunately, charisma is the key ability score for sorcerers, so it's a class that not many dwarves will pursue. You can use your free ability boost from your ancestry, or possibly from another source like your background, to cancel out the flaw and bring you back to a flat 10. Now, this versatile dwarf mini can be used as a sorcerer, or a bard, cleric, or wizard. Like some of the best unpainted minis out there, she sports a large, translucent spell effect. Fighters in 2nd edition can choose between using strength or dexterity as their key ability score, depending on how they want to approach combat. Similarly, they can be trained in either athletics or acrobatics. Then, like all the classes, it's really the feats you choose that define what makes your character different from other members of the same class. Maybe you dual wield, or rapidly fire your ranged weapon, or use massive attacks against your foe, or have quick reactions to deflect blows, or throw enemies off balance with well-placed strikes. All these are feats you can choose at first level, plus a few more. This particular mini might be one of my favorite gnome minis out there. With his outlandish green hair and beard and bright purple armor, he really exemplifies that gnome eccentricity. This figure could be used for any fighting class, like a fighter, champion, monk, or barbarian. As noted in the comments section of our preview video, the halfling wizard here brings to mind the dungeon master in the old Dungeons & Dragons cartoon. He comes armed with a stern look, tiny spectacles, a belt full of component pouches, and the beginnings of a fireball spell in his hand. Wizards in 2nd edition, as in D&D, are eternal students of the arcane. They specialize in a particular school of magic and choose a focus for their arcane thesis, which gives them a special benefit. 4 are presented in the core rulebook: improved familiar attunement, metamagical experimentation, spell blending, and spell substitution, which allows you more flexibility in changing which spells you have prepared for the day. The school of magic you choose also gives you additional spells and spell slots for spells of your school. You can also forego choosing a school of magic and be a universalist wizard, which grants you more flexibility. Rounding out our set of 5 different orc sculpts is the rare Orc Warlord with his war banner and war horn. The Warlord uses the Orc War Chief stat block on page 257. The War Chief, while generally being a more imposing foe at level 2, also has the Battle Cry ability, which gives him and all orc allies within 60 feet of him a +1 status bonus to attack and damage rolls until his next turn. He fights with a great club and a javelin. Our final hobgoblin is naturally the Commander, a rare. On page 207 we find the stat block for a hobgoblin general. They serve as leaders for entire armies and are exemplars of hobgoblin ideals. In battle, they can yell a mighty battle cry to demoralize a foe within range. If they're successful, any ally of the hobgoblin within range can stride up to double its speed as a single action to lead the charge into battle. They are considered level 6 creatures. These so-called butchers appear to match the stat block for a bugbear tormentor mentioned earlier. Armed with a pair of sickles, the bugbear tormentors torture their victims physically and psychologically. They attempt to keep their victims alive and scared for as long as possible. Being quite lithe and dexterous, they can make 2 quick strikes, using the first one to throw the target off balance to leave them flat-footed for the second strike. The tormentor, or butcher as he's called here, also likes to keep trophies from his victims, so you may find one wearing a necklace made of severed ears or worse. The Bugbear Tormentor is a level 3 creature and is found on page 47. Our final goblin, and the only goblin rare, is the Goblin Chieftain. Unfortunately, there isn't actually a stat block in the bestiary for a Goblin Chief in 2nd edition just yet. There was a 1st edition Goblin Chief in the Monster Codex that you can adapt if you like, or you could make your Goblin Chief a War Chanter. They are able to cast some occult spells, such as Bless, Soothe, and Mage Hand. They're also able to sing classic goblin songs, distracting foes, giving them penalties to perception and will saves. This Goblin Chieftain has a variant in the Goblin Village premium set that accompanies this release. That chief is seated upon his throne. You can see our full review of the Goblin Village by clicking the eye in the corner of the screen or at the link at the end of this video. A Goblin War Chanter is level 1 and is found on page 181. We've seen quite a few different takes on Nightmare minis in recent years. There isn't much 2nd edition lore provided in the bestiary aside from describing them as, quote, flaming equine harbingers of death. They are level 6 creatures who will serve as steeds only for the most vile and evil creatures who are able to tame them. They are especially well known to carry night hags. They continually give off columns of black smoke that can sicken others while obscuring the nightmare and its rider. It leaves behind a trail of fire as it gallops by, damaging anyone in the vicinity. Finally, it can carry itself and its rider to another plane of existence at will. Its stat block and the stat block of a greater nightmare are found on page 244. The Ashen Man first appeared in the Pathfinder playtest adventure known as Doomsday Dawn, and may very well be a recurring villain throughout 2nd edition adventures. He is a Hundun, a creature of madness and entropy, who seems to be aware of a coming wave of apocalypses that threaten Golarion. He seeks to assess those who claim to want to protect the planet, and appears in places where cataclysms are about to happen. It may be worth only using this mini to represent that ultimate foe, but this figure can also stand in for any evil spellcaster or undead villain. Blue dragons are cosmopolitan, manipulative, and Machiavellian. They enjoy layering in or near cities, and use subtle manipulation to bend the population to their will. They may position themselves to become kings, queens, and rulers of cities or regions to amass their treasures through taxation and annexation, with their minions none the wiser to their true draconic nature. Others take their true form and lord over desert tribes as gods. They're also known for their mastery of illusory magic, which they use in their diabolical machinations. A huge-sized blue dragon could either be an adult or ancient dragon. The adult is a level 13 creature, and the ancient blue dragon is a level 18 creature. Both are found on page 108. Our capstone mini for this set is the Boar Demon, also known as an Elfeshni. Interestingly, this creature does not appear in the 2nd edition bestiary, and appears to be based on art from the 1st edition. According to 1st edition lore, these are among the largest of the demons found in the Abyss. They're commonly referred to as greed demons, and it's theorized that particularly greedy and successful souls are transformed into boar demons upon reaching the afterlife. They're as intelligent as they are strong and can be a very formidable challenge to most adventuring parties. Luckily, they tend to travel alone rather than in packs. The minis in this set were mostly designed from early 2nd edition art, completed before rules and stat blocks were finalized, which is why some of the minis are sporting different weapons and armor than appears in their stat block. That's just something to be aware of as you bring the minis to your table. None of the minis in this set arrived broken, though a few of the thinner pieces like the Cloud Giant's staff arrived bent. This can be fixed by placing it under hot tap water, bending it back into place, and then dunking it into ice water to set. We often get asked, what's a good set of minis to start with as your first large purchase? If you're just getting into Pathfinder, this is a great set with many common monsters and several player character minis. These minis can be easily slotted into your D&D campaigns as well, if you don't mind the subtle artistic design differences. As we noted in our preview brick video, be aware that giants in Pathfinder and D&D are different sizes, with D&D giants being significantly larger. They share the same base size here, huge, which is 3x3, but if you want to mix and match giant minis, you'll have to come up with an explanation for the size difference. You can certainly say that some of the smaller ones are adolescent. If you do get a case of Legendary Adventures minis, you'll end up with enough common monsters to form good-sized warbands or clans. As you can see here, we ended up with a total of 10 hobgoblins and 18 orcs. And here you can see our 9 bugbears, 17 goblins, and 9 kobolds. Let's talk about creature levels and how to build an encounter. First, you decide how difficult you want an encounter to be. Then you consult this table to see what your XP budget is for that encounter. The table assumes a party of 4. So for instance, if you want a modern encounter for a party of 4, you have an XP budget of 80. But let's say we have 5 players. In that case, we use the player adjustment column and add 20 to our budget for that 5th player. So now our encounter XP budget is going to be 100. If you had 3 players, you'd subtract 20 points instead. But let's roll with our 5-player team here. Now that we have our budget, we consult this table to choose our monsters. We almost always choose creatures that are within 4 levels of our characters. So in our case, let's say we have a group of 5 players all at level 6. So if we choose a level 6 monster, that'll cost 40 of our 100 XP budget. With our 60 XP remaining, we could team them up with an even more powerful level 7 creature, or perhaps we'll let them travel with 3 level 4 creatures as minions. Either way, that'll eat up our 60 remaining XP points, and our modern encounter will be good to go. Note that you don't have to hit your XP budget exactly, but it should serve as a guideline as you're building or adjusting an encounter to suit your needs. One thing I quite appreciated about this set was that it focused on dwarves, halflings, and gnomes as our player character minis. I would add goblins to that list, but I don't think these minis are quite suited to represent a variety of classes. I'm looking forward to seeing what a goblin wizard or druid or a bard would look like. There are a few minis in this set that I think would make your players gasp when they see them for the first time. The blue dragon here looks really good and is quite heavy in the hand. The Ashen Man, the Boar Demon, the Dragon Turtle, they're all really impressive. I expected the Aboleth here to be a little larger, but it's pretty much in line with the previous Aboleth mini we got from D&D years ago. You can check out our Instagram page for comparison shots of the two. And while the giants look great, I think I'm spoiled from the Icons of the Realms line and their massive giant minis. The Chimera also looks really good, and I think so that's good. And the Pteranodon is a little smaller than I would have expected, but it's still a really good mini and a good one to have. But what this set lacked in showcase minis, it's sure made up for in the bread and butter pieces. All the different orcs and hobgoblins and bugbears and kobolds and goblins really help with those basic encounters. And having a variety of sculpts for each kind of monster not only helps your battle maps look more impressive, but it also helps in keeping track of each monster's hit points and abilities. You won't have to put that little plastic milk ring around one orc who's supposed to be the chief. So that just about covers it for the legendary adventures. Let me know what you think in the comments section down below. We'd like to thank our sponsor for this video, the Deck of Mini. Here you can see the just released reference cards for D&D 5th edition. These are animated spell cards with really beautiful lenticular animations on the front and all the information you need to cast the spell on the back. These are a great tool to have at your table to streamline gameplay while having something beautiful to look at when you're planning your next round of combat. They also have a new campaign setting book coming out in November of 2019. Humblewood features a new campaign setting, 10 new playable races, new subclass options, spells, monsters, and more. We just got our hands on some of the new supplementary material that comes with the book, and the little details are fantastic. They introduced a new Humble Scratch alphabet with its own font, so you can write messages for the players to decipher. There's some really cute handouts which you can give your players when they discover certain secrets. And there are dozens of full-color standees you can print out on cardstock paper, and that features all the beautiful art created for the adventure. You can also purchase the standees already assembled if you like. Learn more and see what other materials have been created for the adventure over at humblewood.net. Thanks for watching today. If you found the video useful, please click the little thumbs up button down below. We're always happy to hear your questions, comments, and concerns in the comments section down below. And if you don't check your YouTube subscription page often, you can click the little bell icon down there to be notified when we release a new video. I hope you're doing well, and I'll see you next time at the Gallant Goblin.